Good afternoon. My name is Josh, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Second 20 conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. Mr. Roland Morris, you may begin your conference.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Roland Morris, and I'm working with Clayton Johnson today. We have a series called the Tech in 20 Enablement Series, and this series is to try to expose you to technology in small segments, not to go deep dive on anything, but just to give you pieces of information that could be helpful when you're working with customers, or if you're in the process of going through some brainstorming, innovation. If you've had fragments of exposure to technology in different places, hopefully this will create some new ideas. So the purpose of this session is called BYOD, and Clayton is presenting it. A little bit about our sessions. They are interactive, and if you look on the screen right now through WebEx, you'll see a graph, and that graph is actually live. To vote, to participate in these polls, the easiest way for our international crowd is to go to, on a web browser, go to pollev.com/tech20, and it does work on mobile devices also, as well as IE and other PC browsers. You go to that page, and it'll pull up the current poll that we're working on. It's a touch screen. You click the answers. Some of them you're only allowed to vote once. You can also, if you're in the U.S., you can text your answers to 22333, and what you'll text is the actual text fragment at the bottom of the poll, such as remote or CA office. So this poll is ongoing right now. It looks like we're getting some answers here coming up, so that's great. We'll continue that. This will be interactive. Also, we're going to hold the QA till the end of our session, and we'll take answers. We'll take questions, and hopefully we'll see if there's answers. And we will stay on the line as long as necessary to hear all the questions. So definitely want to make this a group participation and understand and hear everything that everyone has to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Clayton now. He's our topic speaker for BYOD. And Clayton?
Arigato. Johnson と申します。
Whoa.
はじめまして。
Clayton. Clayton.
Yeah.
Just because we're presenting to Asia Pacific, you can actually speak English. You don't have to do the whole topic in Japanese.
Oh, okay. Good. That was going to be a little challenging. Thanks, I appreciate that. Anyway, welcome to BYOD and our Tech in 20. Today we're going to talk about using our devices, things like our iPhones and iPads and different kinds of devices, laptops and so on, where we own the device and we actually connect into the corporate environment. And so we're going to talk about that and work through that process and talk about how this really has changed the corporate nature and some of the challenges that are there and some of the things that we need to start looking at from a corporation standpoint about how to use this information better. And so the idea of BYOD is that I own devices that I can use to connect into corporate, and I want to be able to use those devices because I like them better than using my laptop. Or, for example, when I go and I travel, I take my iPad with me, and so I can go and use this and connect to the Outlook and get all my mail. I can do a lot of work with it. I have a VDI client on it. It allows me to go and do this instead of using my laptop. The laptop stays in the bag till I get to the office or get to my hotel, and it makes it just a lot easier. On the other hand, I mean, I use my iPhone too, and I use it all the time. And so connecting to corporate information is now done more and more with personal devices. And I like them better. I like using it a lot, and I like the idea of being able to do that. And so as we look at these kinds of things, then the question becomes of should we? should the company do this, and should the company allow this, and should they promote it? I mean, I've talked to senior vice presidents or executive vice presidents at CA, and we've talked about the idea where, you know, in this BYOD concept that they had, you know, been approached and by people that said, hey, just give somebody the money instead. Let them go out and buy their own device and own their own device and connect into the corporate network with that, and then we don't have to worry about having any support associated with these devices. We don't have to worry about warranties and assets and CapEx and all of these kinds of things. Just let them connect with their own device. Let them own it. And, you know, there's some pros and cons associated with it. And so today we're going to really focus on that and focus on those pros and cons and what kind of things are there. The flip side of that is, you know, almost the same, but I guess a little different take on it, and that is, do we use our corporate PCs and our corporate devices for work or for personal things? So, for example, my iPhone is you know, given to me by CA, and so the question is should I be able to go in and use my iPhone when I want to go in and do my own personal email, or when I want to play Angry Birds, or when I want to go in and do personal things with this? So do I get to use my smartphone for my own personal kinds of things as well, or should it be exclusively a corporate one? And so I think it's interesting, you know, as we look at this poll, we look at it and 27 out of the 30 are saying, yeah, you know, it should be personal also. I know that at one point in time we talked to, or the company talked about going in and not using these for personal, and all of a sudden when that was the case, everybody turned their phones off at 6 o'clock and walked away from their phones, walked away from their laptops and everything, and then all of a sudden when customers needed help or salespeople needed help, then the pre-sales people were gone, just completely gone from this environment, and they couldn't help. And I don't know what it was like when we talk about the, you know, the end of this last quarter. We've got the holidays and everything else, and, you know, did we end up with a situation where hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars worth of sales were made because we could get a hold of people at any hour of the day or night and be able to push through these transactions? And so kind of the question is, you know, should we let them do that? You know, should we make them do this? Where's the balance in my life? Do I ever quit working? Or, you know, there's a lot of things like this that BYOD really goes in and looks at and you know, has to look at, and why it's become, and that's part of why it's become such a big issue associated with it, is where is the line? Where is the line? My personal functions on my corporate laptop, my personal functions on my my corporate phone, my corporate functions on my iPad, and, you know, that's really what this is all about. And so when we look at this, oh, sorry, did that wrong. You know, you can start out, and in the old school is where the company supplied all of the hardware, all of the software, the network, the data storage, and so on. And everybody was working in the office, and you'd go to the office and work in the office, and then if it wasn't connected to the corporate network, there was no access to it, and it was pretty easy to protect the data, pretty easy to ensure the intellectual property was maintained and so on. But with the advent of smartphones and the iPad in particular, then we started to see some other things, and people started working a little bit more remotely, started pushing things out. And one of the ways the corporations responded to that was with VDI and the concept of virtual desktops. And so I have a VDI client. It allows me to go in and connect to Islandia, and I can go in and run everything, and everything that I run is actually running in Islandia. All the data that's stored is in Islandia, And I don't have to worry about any local storage. I don't have to worry about any local thing. I have my own office here at my house, and so I have my own internet here, but all I had to do was connect over there and do that. And it changed it even now, so I don't even have to go through VPN. Makes it pretty simple. And on the other hand, I have some limitations, and getting data with me to carry with me as I'm going out to see customers becomes exceptionally difficult because I can't copy it. So I end up emailing it to myself, and then I have it in email. And so, you know, maybe that'll work, maybe that won't work for everyone. Another step that's happened with a lot of my colleagues, a lot of people I know have gone to a software-only function where the corporation supplies the software and the individual supplies the hardware and the network and the data storage. They choose. We see this the most often is when people are using Macintosh computers. So they got Macs, they got a MacBook Air, they've got a MacBook Pro. They don't want to use a Windows machine, they want to use a Mac. But the corporation, I mean, you have to jump through some serious hoops to get a Mac from CA today. And, you know, senior vice president level kind of approvals. And so a lot of my colleagues are going in and they're using their own Macs. They bought them out of pocket and they use them because they would rather use them. And they get the Microsoft Office from the corporation to run on that, and they go in and use that. Another one that a lot of companies have gone to is where they just set the data standard. Okay, you know what, we don't really care what you use. You can go out and get a $249 Google Chromebook. We don't care what you get. You can go get a $5,000, you know, dual quad core, whatever, and we just care that your data matches our data. We're going to standardize our data sets at Microsoft Office data processes. And so if your software will put it into a PPTX file or a Word docx file, and it can work back and forth, we really don't care what you use. You just use what you want to use. And then you got the problem, though, that all of a sudden, you know, you have issues of security. You got issues of flexibility, and you got issues of cost. And every executive today that's in charge of the infrastructure, the CTO, and all of the CTO staff is having to deal with this idea of we've got to protect our information, but we need more flexibility. That flexibility that allows us to be agile, allows us to go in and be able to go and run through and get business done no matter what. It's really helpful. But then, you know, where's the cap cost on this, the CapEx? I mean, capital expenditures associated with this, you know, you look at this and you say, if we're going to supply everything, then there's a higher cost. I mean, if they don't have to buy an iPad for me and I'm willing to use my own iPad and I go in and do this stuff, that's great. But, you know, there's a trade-off. And so it becomes an issue of, you know, what do we do? And this is really where everybody is struggling with to try and figure out what is the best way to do this. And so, you know, we're seeing estimates of 90% of employees are using their own personal devices. And that's not just at CA. This is industry-wide and worldwide and all kinds of things that 90% of the people are using some kind of a personal device for work-related activities. And all of a sudden you go, okay, so how are we going to protect our data? And the question then comes in is, where is the data? And, you know, where are you holding your data? Are you just keeping your data just on your corporate issue laptop? Or is it just on your corporate issue phone? Or are you using it in other places too? I mean, Dropbox is a great thing to be able to share pictures. I just came back from a vacation before Christmas, and some of the people we met on vacation took pictures of us, and they dropped them in so we could pull them up in Dropbox. That was a great thing. Yeah, there's a security problem, though, right? And so that security problem really, you know, is highlighted there, and part of this is, hey, you know what? CA blocks Dropbox and from corporate network. You can't get there. You can't save your stuff. You can't pull up stuff inside the corporate network when in Dropbox. And so I think this is a real interesting indicator, though, is when you start looking at 26 out of 27 people are storing it on either everywhere, Dropbox or something like that, or CA devices, but only one is really storing it on CA servers. And so having a policy that is going to protect that data is really a huge issue, okay? And for me, that issue comes to, to the head when we start saying, okay, where's the balance in this? I understand that the company needs to be able to protect their data. They just have to be able to. They have to be able to protect their data. But by the same token, I sit here and say, okay, so if I'm nice enough, I consider it nice anyway, if I'm nice enough to go in and use my iPad for my my personal things, but also to use it in the corporate so that I can get business done faster and easier and more flexibly and so on, if that's a word. If I do that, does then the corporation have the right, if I don't work for them anymore, to come in and wipe my iPad? And, then I start to really have a struggle with that one. Can they just remotely wipe my iPad? Am I willing to let them do that? And I'm not sure I am. But on the other hand, it's their data, and so they should have the right to do it. And so figuring out how in the world we're going to get through that kind of an issue is one of the challenges that people have to figure out. And we have to somehow figure out what we're going to do with that data. And so really the question now is, we got a free text one open, and so you can read on here some of the things that were from the earlier session. We ran this session for North America and Latin America and EMEA earlier in the day, and so and obviously some of the people in those areas are joining in with us today for this one too. But it's interesting as you start looking in here, some of the comments. There's nothing I can't do on my Mac. Data being everywhere is inevitable, and using only CA hardware and software won't prohibit that. It's still going to be there. And so you make them as productive as possible and just let them have their way. And, then it's saying, okay, we need to hire the right people who are good people who are not going to steal the data and they're going to protect the data, but there's also that side of what happens when nasty people come along and try and steal it. And so, and the new one, BYOD, means productivity. Device is one factor, connectivity costs are another one. Are we, going in and the requirement and the demand to have wireless through every one of our offices and ubiquitous wireless everywhere we go, there's a cost issue associated with that. And so, it's kind of interesting, and it's interesting to hear your comments or see your comments. The best part of the new paradigm is that work is no longer somewhere you go, but something you just do. Flexibility and trust are the keys. And my wife says my work is my mistress. And she doesn't necessarily like it, and doesn't like the fact that there's times when I just work when I shouldn't be. And, I catch myself checking my email and checking stuff when I'm out doing something else. And so it's kind of a two-edged sword there. And so there are risks and benefits. And so as we think about this, think about the whole process. But local data storage versus cloud data storage and so on are some things. A couple of other things that were brought up, what happens when we jailbreak these devices? What happens when we start using Android and there are opportunities for people to hack into the Android to get into the systems? I'm not saying iOS isn't hackable. I'm not going there. I don't want to go there. But it's an interesting thing. And a real interesting comment, CA should provide a Dropbox service for us to use. I think that's a great idea. And so as we consider this, you know, think about this, think about where your data is stored, but protect your data. Do everything you possibly can to protect your data. But expect that as we go through this, we're going to start seeing more and more issues of this, and the corporation is going to have to turn around and have policies associated with this, and you can expect that there will be those policies. Right now they're kind of silent on it, but we don't know what's going to happen. But I can guarantee you that if you go into any customer in the world is dealing with this same exact issue. Where does that present an opportunity for CA? Well, certainly when we understand it, we make our products more, you know, accessible and usable, like Executive Insight is for the iPad or the iPhone and Android devices. The more we make it usable for that, then the more we're going to be able to match the kind of process that people are using today. And so as you think about that, chime in and let us know what you think. And so, Josh, let's go ahead and open it up for questions, if you don't mind.
At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Again, that's star 1 for any questions.
Hey, Clayton, this is Roland. While we're waiting for some questions here, so the thing that's interesting is so when we talk about BYOD, it's not just smartphones or anything. We're talking about, I guess, PCs, tablets, smartphones as well, maybe also not smartphones. And then you're saying that also we're bringing these devices, our personal devices, and we're using them to work on corporate networks. So that's interesting, because now we have personal assets mingled with corporate data, perhaps, maybe even corporate software as well as corporate data. And then the other thing you mentioned that was interesting was, so some of us, we're using corporate assets like smartphones for personal use too. So that's still a commingling of both use of the device and the perhaps the contacts and my personal contacts on a corporate smartphone. But you're boiling it down to, you know, this data that's on this commingled device is how do we protect that data, and how does the corporations ensure that the data and the software that's delivered to those remain safe for the company's use?
And that is the big question. And obviously, there's the use question, there's the training question, there's the requirement for Wi-Fi. There's a lot of questions. The applicability, the quality of the work that you can do with the device, and so on. But security is probably the biggest one that I hear people talking about all the time. So.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 at this time. There are no questions in queue at this time.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you do have a question.
Thanks. So we appreciate you being here. Look forward to you next week. Next week our topic is Amazon EC2. And so we're going to go in and dive into that and look at that. We've got a guest speaker for that, and we look forward to seeing you again then. So thanks very much for joining, and this will be in the LMS. All of you that attended today will get LMS credit for this, and anybody else that wants to watch it later, or if you miss next week, for example, you can go into the LMS and find any of these that we finish, and they'll be available. You watch them there through the LMS, and you'll get credit for it. So appreciate you being here. Look forward to talking with you next week, and until then, good selling.
Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude today's conference call. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.